YouTube, what it do is your boy Benji, and we back with the crew. If you're new, please don't forget to subscribe. Got a big time video, of course. Look, I understand you might be a little bit appalled about the title, but it's okay because there's some important things that we got to dive into. Let's check it out. Oh my gosh, this video comes from the Whatever podcast via Andrew Wilson. They have a discussion here about racism.
Here's the thing. There's personal racism and then there's systemic racism, which leads to oppression of a race. You can have personal racism, which I feel like, to me, I feel like technically black people can't be racist because we don't have the power to actually be racist. But I do think
I have read this definition multiple times about, the power that comes behind essentially exuding racism towards another group, and that minorities don't technically qualify for that. Which, I mean, if you do look at the definition, that's not true. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people based on the membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is minority or marginalized. The belief that different races possess different characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. And if we dig a little deeper, prejudice is a preconceived, unfavorable opinion or feeling about someone or something, often formed without sufficient knowledge or based on stereotypes. It essentially is a bias or prejudgment that can lead to unfair treatment or discrimination.
I think we can be prejudiced. We can stereotype. We can have issues against people of other races. That's not right at all. That's just and discriminatory. So in that sense, I don't think we could systematically be racist because we don't have the power in the government, in the world, to do anything about it. We are the most oppressed race. So
you're saying we could be racist on an individual level, but we can't be systematically racist?
Yes.
Because I always look at it like, if right now a white man was to knock on my door and say a slur to me, he can be racist, but what is that doing for me systemically? Now, I do understand there's a difference when we're talking about the day-to-day experiences. Obviously, me as a black man, no matter where I go and what I do, I will still be a black man. So the type of racism that I can have towards, let's say, a white person, at the end of the day, they'll still be able to operate in the United States of America as a white person. They're still going to be white. I will not be, no matter what I do, whatever I try to say or enact upon anybody else. Nothing will change the color of my skin. I still have to live a day to day as a black person. But a random guy, what power does he have over me? You know what I mean?
Should I do the Obama hypothetical?
She answered it right though. Most people don't say that. She's right. I agree with that.
But when people say that, there's the systemic thing. What are they referring to? That's kind of been my biggest critique when we have these discussions, because I think it's subtly a way to obfuscate from the answer. Which, if you just look at the definition, and no one group does not have the ability to be racist towards another one. And thinking like that would actually be racist in its own definition. Sorry, I'm kind of walking on eggshells here. I don't know.
I'm just saying, like, technically speaking, like, when I think of personal racism, I don't think like, oh, I'm being racist to somebody that's a different race. I just think, oh, I'm being prejudiced. Oh, I'm being discriminatory.
Wait.
Yeah, no matter what.
Clarifying questions. Excluding white people from this question, can there be racism between minority groups?
Yeah.
Like, for example, can like a Hispanic be racist towards a black person?
Yes.
Can the Hispanic be racist towards an Asian person?
Yes.
Can a black person be racist towards an Asian person?
Technically, to me, I would say no. But in a sense of discriminating and
Look at the girl in the back with a banana peel.
being prejudiced and stereotyping, yes.
Can a black person be racist towards a Latino?
Like, I would just say the same thing that I just said.
How about this? Can a black person be racist towards a Native American?
Yes. I mean,
Oh.
I'm thinking, but when I think of Native American, I guess that's technically not black.
Like
though,
Cherokee.
so.
But why do you think it's
Are they
different
black?
though? Because racism is
No,
racism.
they're not.
Because
They're
system.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind then.
Native Americans are not black.
Why do you keep saying yes and no for different? Because if racism is just racism. Systematic racism
It's good.
is when you're preventing people from upward mobility.
Right.
But if I'm being racist to a
Which, in that context, I can understand. Like, for example, let's say you work for a company and someone is not only prejudiced against you because of the color of your skin, but they have a ability to allow you to move upward. And they're solely limiting you from moving upward because the stereotypes that come with maybe a certain ethnic group, or simply just because they have prejudice against your ethnic group that you decide to fall into. So again, that is a different form of than versus somebody just coming down to me on the side of the street and just calling me a slur. This is someone actually preventing me from upward mobility within a system or within a company or within a certain community.
Person is still racist. I just don't have systematic power behind it, but it's still racist.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
when I think of the dictionary definition, the dictionary term of racism, I think about the fact that it includes the word power when you look it up on certain
Damien,
dictionary
let's look it up.
do you
definitions.
have
I
the
didn't see that
definition?
one.
That's why I said if y'all want to pull it up,
Huh?
but some places have it
Yeah.
written differently.
This refers to the way racism is deeply embedded in and perpetuated through society's systems, laws, policies, or entrenched practices, regardless of individual intentions or explicit basis. It's not about individualized discrimination, but about the way the institutions or structures operate in order to produce and maintain racial inequality. And that's like something I would more so see. That's why I said it. Other than the example I gave, I think it's tougher to say that one person has systemic power and can be systematically racist. I don't think that necessarily follows. Now, we could talk about the effects that racism has had on systems, different policies, and how that trickle-down effect has affected certain communities. Absolutely. And that in itself may have led to the certain positions that certain groups are in today. And from that positioning that people are in today, that has created certain narratives and stereotypes about a group that a lot of majority groups will look at and have racism. I understand like that kind of long-winded walk around. But again, I think it's more difficult for a random person to have this systemic power over me.
Just Google racism definition. Let's start there.
I'm willing to kind of just grant this for the sake of argument.
Let's
that
do it.
The idea here of power, for instance. Can you tell me what power you think the average white person has in comparison to the average black person?
More freedom,
To do what?
to live your best life. Like,
What?
And that's what I'm saying. What individual person can, like I said, if I'm walking down the street and I see a white guy or an Asian guy or anything like that, even if they call me a slur, what is that doing? How is that affecting my day to day?
Their round meatball donated $200. Yay, black people have never been president or on the Supreme Court or in Congress or on a company.
but truthfully speaking, the president doesn't really have that much power. So even when Barack Obama was president, like that didn't really help
Wait,
black people.
Andrew, I'll let you have the back and forth. I do want to, since you brought up Obama, I'll just give the hypothetical
I
super
don't
quick.
claim him.
So, okay, Barack Obama, when he was president, this is hypothetical. Let's say he was looking to hire a janitor for the White House, but he refuses to hire a janitor because the janitor is white. Is that racism?
He refuses.
And she sat there and thought about it.
Some people would say that's racism.
What do you say?
Would I say that's
it prejudice?
racism? No, I feel like that makes you. Yes, it makes you prejudice. It makes you. I would say
is
that's
it
more so like a
racist?
hotep.
Hotep?
What? Oh, come on, sweetie, come
What
on.
is?
You don't.
I don't.
She went really far with that one. Because typically when you're using words like that, you're using people that don't directly represent African culture correctly. And that's a little different of a description I've heard.
It's like the
hold on,
white
hold on, hold on.
supremacy. It's like the black
Oh,
version of white supremacy.
No, but is it?
It's a hotep.
No, but okay, is it racist?
that's not true,
Is it?
Simone.
Hold on, but is it racist?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, it is.
But
racist.
it's not. But
It's
to
not
me,
systematic.
To
Wait, is
me, it's not systematic because that's just
Well, yeah, it's
one
not.
instance,
It's not.
and that doesn't represent all the black
You're right.
people in
You're
power.
right, but
so
you
that's
admitted
why-
racist,
This
though.
actually, this, hang
You're
on,
right.
hang on, this
From
actually
the way
makes
that
my
you
point.
guys are gonna take it, I'm gonna just go ahead and give it to y'all. Yes.
But to
No,
push
well,
back to
hang
you,
on,
Andrew, real
I
quick.
just want to make sure. I just want to make sure I get this right. If it's power plus prejudice, then you would need to show me what the average, how the average white man versus the average black man, how the average white man has more power than the average black man.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would need to
honestly,
know how that's the
I
case.
did
I
have
tell
my
you.
thread saved. I had my thread saved
Okay.
up, but y'all won't let me get my phone. So.
I can tell you, I would say this. The white man has the power of perception over the black man. In other words, if a person from random walk of life would see me walking down and see Andrew walking down, most of the time, even black people, they will assume higher of the white person
Exactly.
more than the
And I think that this could possibly go over somebody's head, but I want to hear what Andrew has to say to this.
black person. Now, that's not your fault personally.
Well, that's not. Hang on. That's not power though. You're alluding to.
I said power of perception.
Perception.
Yeah, but
How
you're
people view you.
alluding to privilege. Then, if that's the case, then that would mean
That's
that
still some
women
type
were
of- that's still an
powerful. Hang on,
advantage.
then that would mean that women were more powerful than men because they're perceived as being less threatening than men are.
That's
So
true.
If that's what
And
you're
I
utilizing
agree
as
with
a
that.
perspective of,
It's
if
true.
that's what you're utilizing as a perspective of power, then you would have to say that women actually have power over men, and so therefore.
I believe
I
they do,
agree, I
especially
agree,
when it
you're
comes to being beautiful and having pretty privilege. Women do have a lot of power over men. You will see
So-
men.
Yeah, I would probably argue. I mean, there's a lot of metrics where we can argue that women do have power over men. There's like a lot of women who can literally exist and they won't have to worry about much because there'll be somebody there to protect them. There'll be somebody to pay that bill. There'll be somebody to make sure that she has food in her mouth. And she doesn't have to necessarily bring them anything. It could be a random guy just because he views her as attractive.
Giving all their money to women because they're beautiful.
I need you to actually listen to what I'm saying first before you respond, because I don't think you actually heard me. I want you to actually think about the entailment of this. If you're saying that the perception of being privileged in society equals power, then this would mean that women actually are oppressing men because they have the perception of privilege. Do you agree with that?
No.
Okay, well then that's the entailment of your position, so it makes no sense.
So I agree with that's why I said I agree with the premise of what they were saying, and that's why I believe it may have gone over some heads. But when they started to tie it to power, that's when, again, they lost it because again, no matter what nobody perceives, things cannot be true. I can perceive somebody to be rich simply because they hop into a nice car. They can make $3,000 a month and have a $2,000 car payment. You know what I'm saying? And now their money's gone. Obviously, that's an extreme example, and possibly very rare to get done. But just because I view someone in a nicer, newer car or a nicer, bigger house, I can view them to have their life together. I can believe or perceive that their life is all right, and they might be going through it.
I feel like race versus gender is like two separate, different oppressed groups.
No, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about power. Power is the delineating
Yeah.
factor.
So I think what they're trying to get to is kind of more so, if we were to take like an example of this and say that there's certain groups that may have a better opportunity, let's say in a workplace or like in a day-to-day, because of the way the public perceives you. Like, for example, if you're a black guy with dreadlocks, it is very likely that as you walk into a building, people are going to break the neck a little bit and possibly think something of you because there's stereotypes that are linked to black people with dreadlocks. They're not going to originally assume that, oh, this kid probably has a 4.0 GPA. He's probably got a degree. He's probably working a nice, like, they're probably not going to make those original assumptions. Unfortunately, the way that certain groups are perceived, especially according to stereotypes, is different. And that may have an effect on you in your day-to-day. Like, you could be, let's even continue to go onward, a marginalized group. And if you're in a certain area at night, people might, you know what I mean?
Power
But
plus
race
prejudice.
power
plus
and
prejudice
gender
equals
power is
racism.
two different things to me.
Yeah, but power plus prejudice is racism. I say how
Power
does the
plus
average white
prejudice is
person-
racism. I agree.
Hang on, just stop
She's not listening.
for 10 seconds. Okay, I barely said a word to you tonight. Just 10 seconds. It's all I'm
Not
asking.
true.
Okay? If it is the case that you say it takes power plus prejudice, that equals racism, and I ask you, okay, well then how is it the average white person, right, has more power than the average black person? You say, well, it's due to the power of perception, because white people are perceived as being less threatening than black people. If that's the case, why wouldn't we extend this also to the opposite sex and say, well, if you're perceived as being less of a threat, how is that not power for you?
That's true.
I just feel like I see what you're trying to say, but I still think it's two completely different comparisons. Like, I don't think comparing race is the same to comparing gender, personally, especially as a black woman.
That's not an argument. I know
She's missing it.
So I just can't see
Anytime
that.
you make a
I can't see how you're
comparison-
trying to make that parallel for me. Like,
Yeah, but anytime you make a comparison, if I was going to say, what does that fruit taste like, right? I've never tasted it before. What would you compare it to? The same fruit or a different fruit?
One thing Andrew's really good at is like analogies.
a different fruit.
Right, different fruit. That's how you make comparisons. You make a comparison between one thing to another thing so that you can draw an analogy so that we can understand the point of view. But if the point of view is power plus prejudice, I'm willing to grant that viewpoint from your view. If that's the case, though, you need to also grant that viewpoint towards gender norms, because if it's just power equals being less threatening, then you have way more power than men.
As a black woman, no, I would not have more power than a white man. But
Aren't you still less threatening than a black man?
no.
Perceived as less threatening
Oh wait,
than a black
is a black woman less threatening than a black man? Yes.
perceived as
Yes, I
less
agree.
threatening. So then that would be power.
It is
But
power.
she's saying it
There's
doesn't
power in being a
equate to the
woman.
white
So then
man,
you're
though.
more powerful than the black man?
Huh?
So that black women are more powerful than black men.
No,
and
I'm
black
saying
women
when
also
we're
have
talk-
privilege on par with white men because they're perceived as less threatening.
When we're talking about perception, I see what you're saying. Yes, I would say that the black woman is less. I would say that the black woman's perception is going to be viewed as more safer than the black man's perception. But
Just
when we're
like white
comparing a
man.
black man to a white man, I do think
No, I'm not
that.
now. Now I'm comparing a black woman.
Well, that's
So
what I'm doing.
If the black woman is perceived as being less threatening than a black man, and a white man is perceived as being less threatening than a black man, then aren't both of them in a privileged situation?
Yes. Wait.
The black woman and the white man, yeah.
The black woman is in a-
towards white men. I
Can
don't
you
get
repeat
it.
the last
Wait,
part?
what he said?
Black woman and a white man, yeah.
Why
The
can't
black woman
women be
is in a-
racist towards white men.
Why can't? Oh, because I think that more so that she would probably make this case and say that there's a hierarchical order. I think I kind of agree with what Andrew's saying, but I don't think that she ever said that those two were on par.
Can you repeat the last part? I'm sorry.
Yeah, then I don't understand how it is that white men can't be, you can't be racist towards white men if the perception is that you're less dangerous and the perception of them is they're less dangerous. Why? Then you're on par with power.
Systematically speaking, I just don't believe that black people as a whole entire race can oppress white people. Like, I just don't think that's going to happen. That could ever happen because we were the ones who were in shackles, and that is something that we still see, we still see negative effects of to this day. And to me, I just feel like it's.
I do agree that you do have to tie some historical context into it. Obviously, if you were to say, okay, well, let's think about another country like China or something like that. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's different levels.
It doesn't come.
If me right now, I would go to China and they would go to China and China was tomorrow to say, you know what, we're keeping everything pure. If you're not Chinese, get out. You're done. Or, we're going to reduce you to toiling out in the fields. That we have to do. I think similarly, we can make the argument that they can do that in America. It's already been done.
Compare. I see what you're trying to compare.
Just like white men who were taken by Barbary pirates and were.
And true, like I agree with what he's going to do here. A lot of groups have gone through slavery, and I think in the United States history, there's probably a lesser amount of groups that have gone through chattel slavery, and has had a nation/land founded upon that. Especially if we're talking about the United States of America. That's where a lot of people kind of draw these comparisons. But there are plenty of groups across time that have been conquered and taken as slaves. That's regular.
And various.
But how has that affected y'all to this day? How has that affected y'all systematically to this day?
Yes. Hang on. Listen, when you talk about systemic racism, the idea that because black people were in prison against their will, they were, okay, or indentured servitudes, they were that too. Mm-hmm. So were the Irish, so were the Italians, so were many white groups, okay? That would also bleed over necessarily. The whole idea of intersectionality that you're talking about is that we look at key group demographics to see who's the most oppressed based on what? The problem is you have to take that all the way. You can't just stop at one kind of like overview of oppression. You literally have to intersect every idea. In this case, then, we would have to do the same thing with gender. And if it is true that you think that white people themselves are just perceived as less threatening, therefore privileged, you would have to give that to yourself as well.
I do give that to women being perceived as less threatening.
So then you're more powerful.
She just don't think that.
Yeah. I mean, I can see what Andrew's saying. Because a lot of people would probably have that idea too. Like, there's a lot of dudes who are probably today taking themselves out of the dating marketplace. I think that we heard that phenomenon because they don't believe that they have the power to stand on par with a lot of women. And there's a lot of guys that are fearful of their money or their positioning because they say that a woman could take them out of that position. So they still understand that they have an ability to relegate power to a woman. So I think a lot of people do understand that there is some value in women, and if you continue to walk down that ideology, that they do have power. But I think it's a far reach when we're talking about racism. But I can understand what Andrew's saying, and if you're keeping an idea, in order to keep an idea constant, you have to test it across multiple different thresholds.
Power applies to when comparing black women to white men. She's saying that she agrees with that premise.
Because race and gender are two.
But I guess it would be what kind of power? If he's only taking the idea that there's a power of perception, I think that's only one category.
Completely different things. Like, race and gender are two completely different things.
She's not opening her brain up though.
Or do white men have the average white man that a black woman doesn't?
Perception.
Yeah, but
you're going to be viewed as more safe. You guys are going to go to school more often. Y'all are going to get the better high-paying jobs. You guys don't have to worry about who's going to you, what cop is going to you for the
This is all stereotypical.
color of your skin. When you get pulled over, you don't have to worry about, is this cop going to take me to jail just because I'm black?
Wait, hold on, really quick on the whole police brutality thing. You do realize that
I understand what Brian's going to bring up too. This is why I say at a certain point, you should opt out of the conversation because it is not an experience that you live. The same reason I think when a lot of these guys have conversations, let's say, for example, the man versus the bear conversation, I think that in some senses, some of the stuff may be idiotic. It might be nonsensical, but you haven't lived that experience to even have gone through the social norms, expectations, stereotypes in order to get to a point in which that starts to become a belief pattern in your head. If you are black, it is very likely for you, since we've seen a lot of these cases that have gone viral nationwide from stemming from police brutality, that someone now can be in an advantageous position and can use that power to actually take your life. We can make an argument about who sees that number at a grander or higher percentage scale, but unfortunately, since you aren't a part of that people group, it isn't necessarily a direct fear that you have to have. I know growing up, my parents told me as soon as I started driving to make sure that I do X, Y, and Z, because it is very likely, particularly where we live, that somebody could have a different perception on me and things can go awry very, very, very quickly.
There are more white men by police than
Because
there
there's
are.
more white
Hold on,
men
stop.
in
You
the
gotta
world.
stop. No, hold on. We'll be here forever if you guys keep interrupting. So, okay, you do realize there are more white men, just white men, who are by police than there are women of all races combined. And the discrepancy between men and women there is greater than the discrepancy that exists between white men and black men. So would this be evidence of the police force being sexist?
Oh my goodness.
I didn't understand your question. I'm sorry.
Okay, you're talking about the discrepancy in police brutality and police misconduct and when it comes to police, right? You're doing a comparison game between white men and black men, or black people. However, this discrepancy is greater between white men. If you compare white men, the amount of police that white men, there are more white men that are by police than women of all races combined. This includes black women, Latina women, Asian women, and white women. And this difference between men and women is much greater than the difference of police strictly when.
I think this is an incredible reach, Brian. I understand you're trying to follow some of her thought process. She's confused because that is an incredible reach. She was able to admit to y'all, because y'all posed the question, that women, particularly black women, can have more power of perception in opposition to black men. But then taking this argument to the fact that women of all races are less likely to be offed by police than white men, I don't even know. That's a very far reach. I think that's we're starting to get out of the realm of the conversation originally.
Comparing between white men and black men.
Oh, okay.
And also, just so you know, black women go to college more than white women do. So I don't know where, like, this idea though of power.
I mean, yeah, you can. That's a statistic that you can bring up, but then you can easily just point back to why do they need to? Why are they pointed in that direction? In more than X, Y, and Z. I could go down a rabbit hole of my own experiences and say that I know plenty of women who were married and paid zero bills prior to 21. And to this day, a lot of women that are my age, a little older, that I know, as well as women that are younger, that I could, if I wanted to, bring my own personal narratives into this and say, I know there's plenty of women that are white that do not work. The expectation is not put upon them because they come from situations, and that's where we kind of start to talk about the trickle-down effects of racism, particularly if you're talking about like the South. People that are that don't have the same expectations placed upon them, versus, I mean, again, and we can go down a really, really, really deep hole of why this is the way it is. But again, we start to get towards non sequiturs. If you had to ask me,
Or we're discussing power.
But what about the black men?
When I'm asking,
What about the high school
hang on. Let us assume for a second that black men never go to college and only black women do. Okay?
Yeah.
One of your key points for why it was that you couldn't say that a black woman was as privileged as a white man is because a black woman has to worry about where they go to school. Well, the stats really don't show that. They show, in fact, the opposite. So black women enter college at a higher rate than white women, Hispanic and black men. So the thing is that what I'm really looking for
well, black women have a huge amounts of debt as well.
here is I'm just looking for the average white guy.
And we can, again, make this distinction in commentary readily available, because we can start looking at when did these black men start to have kids? When did these black men had to start working? And then we can talk about what are the societal expectations, the social norms, and the things that they're starting to indoctrinate in their heads that are starting to push them away from school. Like, you can go down a long links and a long list and paths as to why this ends up in this direction. I don't necessarily think that it still has to do anything with where they are arguing, because again, I think there's truthfully, we got to talk about the trickle down effects of slavery, Jim Crow. Like, we have to, talk about all these things and why we are where we are today.
How is he more privileged than the average black woman? How?
You know what you say?
Or the average white guy. How is he more privileged than the average black woman? How?
How is the average white guy more privileged than the average black woman?
Yeah.
And
Median weekly earnings, white men in the United States is $13.42 to translate to an estimated salary of about $70,000. White men generally earn more than other racial and ethnic groups. There's a gender pay gap. White women on average earn less than white men. Now we can go down this rabbit hole. Black women were paid 66.5 cents for every dollar paid to white men. And that one of the states with the largest pay discrepancies is in D.C. Black women who worked full-time year-round earned about $60,000 less than white men. Obviously, if we're having a discussion, there's probably a bunch of things that we could point to why this is a thing. You could point to workplace discrimination, occupational segregation, maybe the work being devalued. And then the very little things we can look at: what type of jobs are they working, how much time are they taking off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What degrees are they getting, what job fields are they getting into. I mean, there's plenty of things that we could discuss. But if you want to just look at the average people, there's an easy way to point to the disparity between average people. They have no systemic power, but they can be the only ones that can be racist and not be questioned or criticized. Must be worshipped, given every sort of free gives me that. That's crazy. Get out of jail free cards. Meanwhile, we have to be in a cog in the machine in order to fund the life they taunt us with. 10 years ago, I don't remember commenting on something like this and said, the great thing about being W is I don't get to blame any color for my mistakes. Black people can't raise, but we can be prejudiced and stereotype. The fat people that, oh my goodness. The fact that people like her are allowed to vote is extremely and absolutely terrifying. This is why they force desegregation. The whole thing falls apart, especially when you talk about black-dominated countries. Heck, you can just talk about the black-ran governments in the cities all over the USA. The black man also agreed with his narrative right in the beginning. It's nonsensical, holds zero logic. People with overwhelming emotion shouldn't be allowed to debate until they get it together. This I will agree with. They did change the definition. And somebody with some sense here. From what I understand, etymology, the new definition of racism is closer to the original definition. In earlier decades, racism was defined by not just hating on stereotyping, but creating systems like laws or opportunity barriers by enacting prejudice. We got to remember, a lot of the world was segregated. And if we had to really discuss, a lot of people are still feeling the aftermath of that. I mean, we're not like many generations behind that. By defining racism by hating skin color alone is the best definition because it allows all hateful individuals to be held accountable. And that's why I'm saying I think that a lot of people are forgetting a lot of the specific history that existed in the United States. Plus 10 to fatigue. That's what I'm talking about. Have a functional society with running water, electricity, and rule of law with a little bit of racism, or let blacks run things and live in South Africa. Oh my goodness. And the fact that you understand that we're having this conversation and people are upset about the way that she thinks in the comments below, this is additionally a portion of the racism that we underwent in the United States that has led to people having these ideologies and being conditioned to think a certain way. So again, this is why I think that the conversation is a lot broader than just skin color. I think that they can concede and should concede that everybody can have hatred or prejudice towards one another based on the color of their skin. But there's a real deep rabbit hole that you can walk through to understand why a lot of people have these ideas that they can't be. But y'all let me know in the comments below. This was a longer one. Let me know if you like to see videos like this, or give me some suggestions of stuff to watch. Thanks again.